So government has announced a marginal increase in the cocoa producer price index for the next crop season. It increased by over 8%. And this means that a 64 kilo bag of cocoa would now be sold at 515 Ghana cedis, while a ton would go for 8,000 rather, and 249 cedis. Minister of State in charge of Food and Agriculture, Dr. Nura Jara, announced this on behalf of President Akufo-Addo at a program in Sunyane in the Bono region earlier today. Well, joining us on the phone for some reactions is the General Secretary of the General Agric Workers Union, Edward Karuwe. So an 8% increase. What do you think about it, sir?
Let me say good evening to you and to your listeners and to Ghanaian workers and all farmers. It's an increment. An increment is a positive development for the farmers. It's also an indication that government is interested in seeking their welfare. But then we also have to come from the angle that government itself is also challenged. You know, government has to make this increment in the face of dwindling global cocoa market price. And an 8% increase, certainly as a farmer, as they would have wished that it goes beyond that.
Okay, so help us.
But I think that is a good offer.
Yes, I wanted you to help us understand the dynamics of this whole thing. Talk about the fact that government is increasing it at a time that cocoa prices are on the decline globally. What kind of a difference does it make really, and what kind of an impact, if negative, would this have if prices are going up whilst the globally price of cocoa or the purchase of cocoa is going down?
Well, you know, first and foremost, we are operating in the global market. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, what happened in Cote d'Ivoire is that when the price of cocoa in the world market dropped significantly, they also reduced their prices to their farmers, their producer price. But Ghana never did that. You know, so government or cocoa board maintained the price at a very high cost, in the sense that in the face of the drop, they still maintain the high, the price. So that's why I'm saying that it's a challenge for government. They would have wished that they increase the price more than this, but I think that it's a positive sign, and I believe so, that in future, given all the arrangements government is making, Cocoa Board is making, the collaborations they are having with Cote d'Ivoire, if those things are sustained, certainly farmers could be hoping to have a more higher increase.
And what kind of a difference, again, will the joint collaboration with Cote d'Ivoire make?
Well, you know, one of the things is to be able to control the world market price. You know, and this is what Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire have done, and it's a unique, you know, collaboration. Is a unique achievement. You know, in the current development, is that the whole world is liberalized. There are these WTO rules that do not allow countries to come together to try to control the global price. But here is the case: Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire is seen as underdogs in terms of global economics, because the two are developing countries. Yet they have been able to stand up to the more advanced countries and their consumers to say that, look, we cannot continue to be at your beck and call and you deciding the prices. So this type of collaboration, I believe, should be replicated and expanded to include other West African countries and African countries. If we are able to sustain this, then of course we will be able to get the price that we deserve. I Africa is just producing and for the world for nothing. Yeah, so to speak.
All
because
right.
they get far less than what they ought to have been getting. And it is a matter of the global economic politics and dynamics which no longer operate on comparative advantage of production, but competitive advantage.
All right. Thanks very much for your thoughts tonight. That was General Secretary of the Agric Workers Union, Edward Carwell, there on news that government has announced a marginal increase in cocoa producer price going up by 8%. Let's move on now. Government has begun setting up digital and mechanized centers to shore up production of rice across the country. The move by government is to help reduce rice importation and encourage more farmers to go into rice production. In 2018, rice importation stood at $1.1 billion, and there are indications if nothing is done to improve the production of rice in Ghana, the figure might increase. Richard Kojunyako was present at the inauguration of one of the mechanized and digital centers at Twifo Praso and has come through with this report.
The Mechanized and Digital Center at Twifo Praso is one of the many mechanized centers that would be set up by the Agric Ministry to enable farmers get access to equipment and other farm inputs for the cultivation and production of rice. Rice imports continue to surge ahead of production in Ghana. Increasing rice production and yields has therefore become a priority to government. Central Regional Director of Agric, Hubert Delafiao, says they are hoping to cut rice importation by 50% with the introduction of these centers.
Figures for 2018, that's importation of rice, it stood at about $1.1 billion, which is a very huge amount. And because of that, the government has taken the initiative to be able to also try and reduce those imports by trying to kind of grow what we can grow so that we'll reduce those imports. So because of that, the government has developed a special rice initiative, which is under the Planting for Food and Jobs, to be able to at least make an effort and consciously try to reduce the imports of rice.
Member of Parliament for Twifo Etimokwa, Abraham Juma Odum, who championed the setting up of the center, is upbeat the initiative will do the country a lot of good as well as lifting farmers out of poverty.
We need to, one, reorganize and rearrange our rice farmers. And besides that, we also need to give them a support. So the Ministry of Agriculture has given approval for such equipment to be distributed to areas where they do rice. You only make the necessary requisitions for various services to be provided. You don't need farm hands to come and do any work. All what you need is you make a requisition to the center, and the center will bring all the equipment right from land preparation to sowing, and then
Regional Agric Engineer Bufa Owusu Echiang says government is training farmers and equipping them with chemicals to help fight armyworms that rocked many farms about 2 years ago.
Government is giving free chemicals to combat the armyworm whenever they come. And then we're also giving training to the farmers to be able to identify the symptoms of the armyworm. We are now training them in early surveillance, that 2 weeks after germination, you should be able to go around to see whether you see any sign of the armyworm. And drugs are there, chemicals are there at the regional office, and we give it to the district. And when the district is finished, they come to the region to take additional stuff.
Some of the farmers who spoke with JoyNews expressed their excitement about the gesture and hoped it would change their situations and circumstances for the better. Richard Kojunyako, JoyNews, Cape Coast.
Some businesses in Kumasi are threatening to pass on the margin of increase in utility tariff to prices of goods and services. It comes after the announcement of an increase in water and electricity tariffs by 2.22% and 5.94%, as well as an increase in telecommunication tax. They say the current increase is insensitive and inimical to businesses, and they will have no other option than to pass on the cost to consumers. Prince Apia has more.
The business community here in the Ashanti region, what they tell us is that it is too much for them, because initially it was the increase in fuel prices which had a corresponding change in transport fares. That has already affected some goods and services. Now utility prices, water and electricity, which almost every business in this part of the country makes use of. And so they believe that those are also going to affect the prices of goods and services.
When I buy like 100 cedis worth of electricity, I'm going to deduct it, which I will not allow that deduction to go into my account. So I have to add it to. My bill has been increased to 5.5%. Definitely, I also increase my goods to 5.5% so that I will also not incur any debt.
We use both water and electricity. We fear patronage of our work will decline, but we have no option than to increase our services. It will be gradual.
Fuel and transport fares have been increased, and now electricity. We charge 8 cedis per cut, though they say it's expensive. Government must reconsider the utility prices.
Already, people are complaining of no money in the system, but we are planning to increase our services, else we will run at a loss.
We hear that the prices of fan milk, yogurt, and its associated products have also increased. What we are seeing is that those that are being sold for 1 cedi are now being sold for 1 cedi 20 pesos. Those at the cost of 1 cedi 50 pesos, for instance, are currently being sold for 1 cedi 80 pesos. And so that has been the changes that we are currently seeing. And so those working at Asafo, for instance, who do a lot of printing, are also going to be affected. And they tell us that seriously, it's going to affect a lot of things. Cost of printing, which means cost of books, cost of stationery items are all going to be affected, and the effect is going to be generally really big. So the call is that government should also look at increasing the salary or the minimum wage of employees so that consumers and the people of Ghana can also pushing themselves with these increases in utility prices. My name is Prince Apia, reporting from Kumasi.
Right, thank you, Prince, for that report. Let's move on to other stories. Industry players in the downstream petroleum sector have suggested to government to take its hands off operations of the Tema oil refinery. This, they believe, will make the company more productive and reduce the persistent margins lost every year. CEO of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors, Senor Jose, after the launch of the 2018 industry report, renewed the call, saying the coming on stream of some major refineries in Africa, including Dangote, will render toll inefficient if the private sector is not allowed to take over the company.
The 2018 industry report gives an overview of how the downstream petroleum sector has performed in the previous year and gives recommendations for improvement. The report indicates that the Tema oil refinery has not been viable as expected during the year 2018, a situation attributed to government interference. According to the chief executive of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors, Senor Jose, the growing petroleum industry needs a refinery operated by a private investor, hence the call for privatization.
So it's not in this situation just by some. It's because of the governance issues in there. It's politics that has made Tor what it is. But that story can change and must change. To really get capital in there, to turn it around in a sustainable way, you need some private or commercial orientation in the management of its affairs. You can't achieve that when you have politicians running the place. Politicians running the board or its entire system. The current Tor MD is doing very well. He's working hard to turn things around, but the confidence that's required will come with some private sector participation in it. Maybe a concession, possibly. We've discussed a possible lease arrangement or an outright divestiture.
He's been speaking about the implications of the coming on stream of Dangote refinery, which is expected to be the largest oil refinery in West Africa.
Dangote is dealing with a $12 billion humongous project. We don't need that much to turn around to. If you have the management right, maybe you probably will need a tenth of that or probably a fifth of that. You know, you may need probably a lot more engineering analysis to come to that conclusion. Desulfurizers and all that to make it modern. Because there's cost that's already in there. It's like this house, you can't do anything about it. You've built it already. So you're thinking of how to occupy it, right? But when you're now going to build it, then you start thinking about, will I get a rental income or not get a rent? But here you are, you've built it already, so you might as well just rent it. You understand? So once we have, what we have gives us a certain step a bit ahead. And we have a market here. If we don't try and take control over the market now, and Dangote is the one who's going to take over this market.
According to the industry reports, the energy sector levy has reduced the toll debt to about 1,673 million cedis as of August 2019.
Now, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, is asking government to dissolve the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, or establish a new law to govern it. According to the Institute, the GNPC has over the years moved away from its core mandate and engaging in corporate social responsibilities, which are eating into its profitability. My colleague Bismarck Awusa was at a press conference on the management of GNPC revenue and Ghana Petroleum funds organized by the IFS.
2018, the GNPC had invested about $29 million in its CSR activities alone, compared to $5 million in 2017, a situation the Institute describes as loss-making. Speaking to Joy Business, the executive director of the IFS, Professor Newman Kusi, has called for an overhaul of the laws governing the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation.
GNPC was established by an act 1983. It's 36 years now, and there's nothing as far as oil exploration and production and development is concerned. There's nothing that GNPC has got to show to us. Okay, so we are saying that maybe it's because of the law, the way the law that established GNPC and those type of things. So let us amend the law or formulate or produce a new law that will force or make GNPC to focus on its key responsibility: exploring oil, develop the oil, and produce the oil.
He has, however, called for the dissolution of the GNPC if the corporation continues on this trajectory of engaging in loss-making activities.
The question is, what are we getting from GNPC as far as its mandate, the mandate that established the organization? What are we getting out of it? So if we are not getting out of it, then why do we have to continue to have the organization exist?
But don't you think this is to the extreme?
Well, I don't think it is the extreme. We were established to do ABCD. This ABCD that you are established to do, for which you are finding you are not doing it, it means that you are incapable of doing it, and therefore we should take it away from you.
Meanwhile, the IFS is also calling for an amendment to the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, PRMA, to effect the annual budget funding amount. Senior Research Fellow of the Institute, Leslie Dwight-Mensah, bemoans the lack of clarity in the PRMA regarding the Minister of Finance's authority to set a ceiling on the Ghana Stabilization Fund.
The law should say that at all times the balance should not be less than a certain level. That's a floor. It means you can't go below that floor. And this floor, because the Stabilization Fund is intended to alleviate shortfalls in petroleum revenues allocated to the budget, this floor could be set as a percentage of the ABFA, of the annual budget funding amount. So in the budget, if the minister projects his revenue expected to come into the budget, the ABFA, he could then say, for example, or the law could require that you should at all times have a minimum of 40% of the ABFA projection in the stabilization fund.
The IFS has also called for transparency in reporting the country's petroleum revenue performance. Bismarck Awusa, Joy Business.
Now, Center for Extractives and Development Africa is charging government to desist from capping the Mineral Development Fund. Executive Director of the center, Emmanuel Koyole, says the Ministry's incessant release of half of the 20% of the fund due them has impoverished mining sectors. Mr. Kuyele says though the objectives of the establishment of the fund were well intended, evidence from mining enclaves have shown operation of the fund has encountered major difficulties.
So there are a lot of Mr. Kuyele said communities still lacked basic infrastructure, adding that the utilization of the revenues from the mineral resources over the past decade had failed to address basic needs and problems associated with mining.
Yeah, I was saying that the Minister of Finance is doing this on the back of the Capping Act, which was passed in 2018. So basically what is happening is that this law was passed in 2016. Another law was passed in 2018, which empowers the Minister of Finance to cap all statutory funds. So this is being treated by the Minister of Finance as a statutory fund. Just like education fund, whatever fund. That's the way he's treating it. So your question is, how do we address this? I give an example of this Assembly Common Fund. Was it this Assembly Common Fund? Yes. Well, somebody went to court last year. Was it this year? Last year. They were MPs who went to court to challenge the Minister of Finance for capping the Assembly Common Fund. The court held that actually the minister cannot cap. They cannot use the Capping Act to cap the Common Fund. So Common Fund has been excluded. So one way is, since we have written and it appears the minister is not budging, one way is to test the law. So basically, and I said this, I said, if you listen to the minister, listen to whatever the government is doing on mining communities, at least from what they say and on paper, they are on the side of mining communities. But one government action, which is capping of LDF, is preventing the achievement of that objective.
The meeting brought together journalists in the Ashanti region to be sensitized on the Mineral Development Fund and ways they are being utilized. Suleiman Akone, CEO, Ghana Chamber of Mines.
Mining is finite, but yet, through efficient and prudent management of the mineral resources, the resources which come out of mining, and it is not just mineral revenue, all the resources, all the capabilities, the opportunities around mining, if you're able to harness this optimally for our country, effectively, we would see sustainable mining.
For JoyNews, Kwesi Deborah.
And that's Business Live tonight. Thanks for watching. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Darryl Kwao. Thanks for watching.